Tragedy strikes as WWE and Roman Reigns mourn the loss of a WWE legend from heart attack. The wrestling world is in mourning. WWE superstar Roman Reigns and the entire bloodline pay tribute to the life and legacy of Omega Fatu, a legendary figure who left us too soon. In this emotional video, we uncover the story behind Omega Fatu's tragic passing due to a heart attack, his impactful career, and the legacy he leaves behind. It has been 20 years since Omega Fatu died, and Roman Reigns, the entire Anoa'i family and WWE are still grieving the loss of a legend, a suffocating silence that swept across the locker rooms of WWE like a cold wind, the kind that doesn't just chill skin, it freezes time. Phones buzzed, heads turned, voices hushed. And somewhere, in a private dressing room tucked away in the bowels of an arena that had seen decades of wrestling history, Roman Reigns stood still, his face pale, his eyes locked on a single notification flashing across the screen of his phone. Omega Fatu has died of a heart attack. In those few, devastating words, the unthinkable became real. A legend, a pillar of wrestling's most revered family, was gone. This wasn't just another headline in the endless carousel of sports entertainment. This was blood. This was lineage. This was family. And in WWE, where the line between character and reality often blurs, there are still moments that hit too hard, too deep, to be scripted, because Omega Fatu wasn't just a legend. He was a mentor. A protector. A quiet warrior whose legacy stretched across decades, promotions, continents, and whose influence could be felt in every punch Roman Reigns ever threw, in every match Solo Sikoa ever fought, in every entrance Jacob Fatu ever made with fire in his eyes and silence in his step. He was the elder. The keeper of the old ways. A name not everyone watching on Mondays and Fridays may have recognized, but one that every man in the Anoa'i family whispered with reverence. Now, he was gone. And with him, a chapter of the bloodline's history had ended, forever. The first sign that something was wrong came early that morning, long before the news broke. A producer backstage at Raw, who spoke under anonymity, said there was a strange energy in the building that day. Roman looked off, he recalled. He's always calm, composed. But this was different. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't snapping. He was just quiet. Too quiet. No one dared ask, because in WWE, silence is often louder than any storyline. And that silence would soon explode across the entire wrestling world. Omega Fatu, real name Toa Sibilio Fatu, was found unresponsive in his hotel room just hours before his scheduled flight to San Francisco, where he was set to attend a private Anoa'i family gathering. It was supposed to be a celebration. An informal reunion of warriors, Roman, Solo, Zilla, Jacob, even distant cousins from across the Pacific. Umaga hadn't missed a gathering in years. He was the voice of tradition, the one who reminded every new generation of Fatu what it meant to carry the blood. When he didn't pick up his phone that morning, his eldest son grew concerned. When hotel security opened the door, it was already too late. Cardiac arrest. Sudden. Massive. Irreversible. The wrestling world was rocked, but it was the bloodline that shattered. Roman was the first to be told. According to insiders, he immediately canceled his scheduled segment that night. WWE executives offered to pre-tape a tribute, but Roman refused. He didn't want a script. He didn't want lighting. He wanted time. Alone. To mourn, backstage staff reported that he remained in his locker room for over an hour. No music. No phone calls. Just stillness. At one point, Paul Heyman reportedly approached the door but never knocked. He knew better, said a veteran crew member. He's known Roman long enough to understand this wasn't a promo. This was real. By midday, word had reached the rest of the roster. Solo Sikoa was said to have left the gym immediately, canceling a promotional shoot for SummerSlam. Jacob Fatu, wrestling overseas at an independent show in Tokyo, walked off mid-match after receiving a whispered update from his corner. The footage has since been pulled, but those in attendance described Jacob dropping to his knees in the ring before walking out in silence. The bloodline, fragmented in recent months, had found unity again. In grief. WWE released a brief statement by 3 p.m. We are deeply saddened to learn of the passing of Umaga, a respected member of the Inoue family and beloved figure in the wrestling community. Our thoughts are with his family, friends, and all who were inspired by his strength and legacy. But what a press release couldn't capture was the weight. The silence. The crack in the foundation of the empire that Roman Reigns had built, not just as a character, but as a man, because Umaga Fatu wasn't just family. He was why this family mattered long before the bloodline became a chant. Long before tribal chief was etched into history. There was Umaga. Training in dimly lit garages. Driving ring trucks. Teaching young cousins how to fall without fear. Preaching respect, discipline, and identity. He was never flashy. Never loud. But he was always there. Without Umaga, a Samoan wrestling historian said, there would be no Roman Reigns. There would be no Usos. He wasn't a WWE household name. But he's in every part of that family's DNA. And Roman knew it. Sources close to the family said Roman immediately flew to California to join Umaga's immediate relatives. His wife, Galena, and their children remained by his side the entire time. No press. No public appearances. No tweets. Just raw grief backstage in WWE. The tone changed instantly. Storylines were paused. Bloodline segments postponed. A scheduled face-off between Solo Sikoa and Cody Rhodes was scrapped at the last minute. A production assistant shared that the entire segment had been rewritten in hours. No one felt right filming a fake family feud when the real family was in mourning, she said. Even Triple H, known for his cold professionalism, addressed the locker room personally that night. Tonight, we honor not just a legend, but a bloodline. One of the men who made this place sacred. He paused before saying the final line, and if you see Roman, give him space. But give him love. The funeral is expected to take place in Hawaii, at a private Inoue family compound that has stood for generations. It will be closed to the public. But insiders say that every major wrestling name who's ever crossed paths with the bloodline is expected to be there. From Rikishi to The Rock. From Heyman to Cena. Even Vince McMahon, estranged from the product, is said to be making calls. And at the center of it all, Roman Reigns. Sources say he has yet to speak publicly. Yet to post. Yet to appear. But those close to him say this has hit harder than even the loss of his own father, because Umaga wasn't just blood. He was a mirror. He was who Roman wanted to be when the cameras weren't rolling, said a family friend. Calm. Grounded. Fiercely loyal. And now he's gone. But grief is not the end of legacy. And Umaga's story didn't begin, or end, with tragedy. Over the coming hours and days, we will trace that story. From the dusty warehouses where he fought for scraps, to the underground promotions that whispered his name like legend. We'll hear from those who trained under him. Those who fought beside him. Those who watched him disappear into the shadows of history, only to find out he'd been holding them up the entire time, because while Roman Reigns may be the face of WWE, Umaga Fatu was the soul behind the mask. And now, in the wake of his passing, the wrestling world must reckon with what it truly means to carry a legacy. And what is lost when the men who built it are no longer here to guide it. This is not just a tribute. This is an investigation. A reckoning. A goodbye, and the question hanging over all of it, how does the most dominant faction in modern wrestling history go on, when the man who taught them what it meant to be family is no longer here to lead them? Stay with us. Because this is only the beginning. Long before arenas were packed with thousands chanting "We the Ones," long before pyro erupted in honor of the tribal chief or Solo Sikoa was seen as the enforcer of the new generation, there was a man whose name barely appeared in WWE credits, but whose fingerprints are on every single brick laid beneath the empire we now call the bloodline. His name was Umaga Fatu. And in a family of giants, he was the quiet storm. He wasn't the flashiest. He wasn't the loudest. He was rarely even on television. But every single man who's worn the Samoan legacy on his shoulders knew who he was. They didn't need to see him on camera. They felt him in every step, every gesture, every creed.to understand what Roman Reigns lost, and what the wrestling world lost, you have to go back decades. Not to the bright lights of WrestleMania, but to a warehouse in Pensacola, Florida, where the air smelled of sweat, old leather, and ambition. It was here that Umaga Fatu began training young cousins, boys barely out of high school, including Lady Joseph Anoa'i, the man who would become Roman Reigns. He was called Omega not because he was the end, but because he was the last wall between chaos and tradition. He was the enforcer behind the scenes. The glue between the warriors. The silent one you didn't cross. And everyone who trained under him, Uso twins, Roman, Zilla, Jacob, Lance, even younger talents we haven't met yet, credits him with instilling the code of honor that turned a family into a dynasty. He made us bleed before we could shine, Solo Sikoa once said in a private shoot interview. You wanted to walk into that ring carrying the name Fatu, Anoa'i, Reigns, you had to go through Umaga first. And he didn't care if you were blood. In fact, he was harder on us because we were. Born in the early 1970s in San Mateo, California, Toa Sabilio Fatu, later known as Umaga, was the third cousin of the legendary Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika. While his older cousins broke into the WWF, Umaga stayed behind, working the regional territories, often in secret, often unpaid, sometimes even under a mask in lucha-style circuits. He wasn't after fame. He was after discipline. Those who knew him describe a man with iron hands and a steel code. He believed wrestling was sacred. A calling. Not a brand. Not a gimmick. He despised shortcuts. He loathed politics. And though the business never gave him the spotlight, he never let that bitterness seep into his teachings. Instead, he poured everything he had into the next generation. Roman Reigns was just 19 the first time he stepped into a ring under Umaga's watch. This wasn't WWE's Performance Center. There were no HD cameras. No trainers with earpieces. Just concrete floors, a ring patched with duct tape, and the raw lessons of survival. He made me cry, Roman once admitted off camera. Not because he was cruel. Because he was right. He said, if you want to carry our name, you better learn how to carry pain first. Jacob Fatu tells a similar story. A moment when he considered quitting wrestling altogether, frustrated, broke, disrespected. Omega pulled him aside, pointed to a framed photo of the family's elders, and whispered, do it for them, or don't do it at all. That was Umaga. He was never in it for the fame. He was in it for the fire, but that fire, as powerful as it was, burned in private. Umaga never signed with WWE. He turned down 3 development deals, according to insiders. Not because he couldn't make it, but because he didn't want to be turned into something he wasn't. He refused to be molded by the machine. He molded the machine himself, quietly, through the men he trained, through the stories he passed down, through the example he set. He taught them to earn the entrance music. To respect the business. To honor the pain. And above all, to protect the family. In the early 2000s, when Roman Reigns was still playing football and the Usos were balancing college and chaos, it was Umaga who kept the family united. While fame began to fragment the clan, he was the one who kept calling meetings, hosting cookouts, organizing sparring sessions. He was the constant. At his small training gym, Fatu Warrior Dojo, he mentored not just relatives, but young kids from broken homes. He didn't charge them. He fed them. Housed them. Gave them rules when the world gave them none. A few of those kids would go on to wrestle in indie promotions. One of them, Ricky Reyes, posted a tribute on Instagram the night Umaga died. He didn't have to help me. I wasn't Samoan. I wasn't blood. But he called me USO anyway. He saved my life. And that, in the end, was the mark Umaga Fatu left, not on a championship belt, not in record books, but in people. In hearts. In broken kids turned into warriors. In a dynasty that might have fractured long ago, if not for the quiet strength of the man who stood at its foundation. Backstage, Umaga was known simply as Uncle. You didn't question him. You didn't argue with him. You listened. And in an era where egos clashed like steel chairs, Umaga's presence had a gravity to it. The only time he ever appeared on WWE television was a blink-and-miss moment, standing at the edge of the ring during Roman's coronation at WrestleMania 39. Fans didn't recognize him. He wore no suit. He held no mic. But Roman nodded toward him during the celebration. And that nod? That was history. The funeral, set to take place in a small coastal town in Hawaii, will be private. But there's talk of a tribute show. Perhaps even an official WWE Network documentary. And sources inside the company say Roman himself is working with creative to honor Umaga in a way that breaks kayfabe. He wants the world to know who Umaga was, one insider said. Not the character. Not the bloodline angle. The man. There are rumblings, unconfirmed, that Roman may take a brief hiatus. That a bloodline reset may be coming. That Solo's rise, Jacob's conflict, even Zilla's next move, all of it, will be paused, re-evaluated, reshaped by the man whose death has reminded them all what the name Fatu truly means, because the truth is, Umaga Fatu was never about dominance. He was about purpose, and now, in his absence, the family he built must ask itself, have they honored that purpose, or lost it in the spotlight? That question, more than any championship, may define what happens next in the story of the bloodline. Because the heart of the bloodline is gone, and now, the Empire must decide what it becomes. Without him, when tragedy strikes in WWE, the line between fiction and reality blurs. Until it breaks entirely. There are moments in this business where everything, ratings, rivalries, rehearsals, grinds to a halt. And the death of Umaga Fatu was one of those moments, not just because of who he was, but because of what he represented, the moral compass of a family that now dominates the very core of WWE storytelling. And with his death, that compass has gone missing. Backstage at WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, the fallout began within hours of the news. According to company sources, a confidential Zoom call was held that same evening between Triple H, Paul Heyman, key bloodline members, and several top-level producers. The purpose was not to brainstorm a tribute, but to recalibrate the future, because Umaga's death wasn't just personal, it was seismic. We lost more than a man, Triple H reportedly said, his voice low, tired. We lost the center. For months, WWE has revolved around Roman Reigns and the Bloodline saga. A storyline that blurred the line between family and faction, truth and fiction, honor and betrayal. But now, that blurred line had snapped and the cost was real. Insiders say Paul Heyman, normally the master manipulator of the narrative, was visibly shaken. Umaga wasn't just Roman's uncle, he was Heyman's link to the past. The two had crossed paths in the early ECW days, where Umaga quietly mentored several Samoan prospects trying to break into the hardcore circuit. Though Umaga stayed behind the curtain, Heyman always knew the truth, that the bloodline wasn't Paul's invention, it was Umaga's legacy. I didn't create this, Heyman was heard saying backstage. I just televised it. For the first time in years, Heyman reportedly suggested pulling back the bloodline storyline entirely, at least for the next few weeks. But Triple H disagreed. We can't pause the legacy, he argued. We have to honor it. And so, the internal debate began. Do you suspend the fiction to mourn the truth? Or do you carry the story forward, hoping that the ring can bear the weight of that grief? One producer likened it to the days after Eddie Guerrero's death. The air. The confusion. The ache. That week felt like wrestling died, he recalled. This feels the same, but deeper. Because this time, the story we're telling is about family. And now the family is bleeding for real. The creative team, already knee-deep in SummerSlam scripts, began rewriting entire arcs. Roman's involvement, previously planned for a climactic return segment, was placed on indefinite hold. Solo Sikoa's heel evolution was delayed. Jacob Fatu, just weeks into a rising trajectory, pulled back from public appearances, but perhaps the biggest change came from within Roman himself. According to close sources, Roman made a private call to WWE's executive team just 36 hours after Umaga's passing. Not to cancel. Not to step away. But to make a single request, don't fake it. If you're going to do this, make it real. What did he mean? Not a tribute video. Not a quiet mention. Roman reportedly asked WWE to give Umaga the one thing he never had, a legacy on camera. Not as a footnote. Not as a ghost. But as a founding father of the very dynasty the bloodline rests upon. He proposed a special segment, a sit-down, off-script, no kayfabe. A roundtable with the remaining bloodline members. No characters. No titles. Just family. Talking. Remembering. Mourning. WWE was hesitant. But Heyman pushed. Let him speak, he said. Let them all speak. This isn't a promo, it's a funeral. The idea is now under active development. A possible airing during the week of SummerSlam. Sources say it would be the first time WWE suspends its main storyline mid-arc for a real-life loss. Without breaking the fourth wall entirely. In other words, real emotion, real memories, real pain, inside the framework of fiction, because the truth is, WWE can't ignore Umaga Fatu. He's not some retired Hall of Famer with a highlight reel. He's the reason the bloodline exists at all. Executives are now weighing another dramatic shift, a temporary bloodline true storyline, where Solo, Jacob, and even Zilla Fatu acknowledge the loss of their mentor and suspend hostilities for one night only. A ceasefire in character, to reflect the unity out of character. Behind closed doors, the company is rattled. Grief doesn't follow the script. And WWE has always relied on scripting the unspeakable. But this time, the pain is too real. Too close. Too deep. A senior writer, who has worked through multiple superstar deaths, said it best: Umaga was invisible to the audience. But to us? He was the architect. He was the quiet force behind every major bloodline idea. His approval mattered more to Roman than Vince's ever did. Triple H is also said to be personally involved in the tribute process. He's asked the production team to comb through decades of dark match footage, training tapes, and home videos. Anything that shows Omega training, speaking, teaching. The goal? A 10-minute video that doesn't just remember a man they never saw, but introduces him to the world. Everything they loved. And quietly, Roman is writing a speech. Not as the tribal chief. Not as the Universal Champion, but as Joe. A man grieving the loss of the one person who never needed to see a championship belt to call him a king. Behind the scenes, security has been increased around Roman's home. Not for threats, but for privacy. The family has gathered. Galena Becker has cleared his schedule. His children, normally shielded from media, have been kept close. This isn't about appearances anymore, this is about healing. And for WWE, the company that turns pain into programming, it's a rare moment of reckoning. Umaga Fatu never sold out a stadium. He never headlined a pay-per-view. But the men who did? They carry him in every move, every stare, every word, and now, in his absence, WWE finds itself adrift in unfamiliar waters, because the one man who never needed the spotlight has left behind a void that no spotlight can ever fill. By the time the news officially broke on WWE social platforms, accompanied only by a black and white photo and the caption "Rest in Power, Umaga Fatu, 1972 to 2025, it was already too late to contain the heartbreak. Within minutes, the comment sections were flooded. Thousands of messages. Not just from fans, but from superstars past and present. From promotions that had once competed bitterly with WWE. From people who had never seen Umaga Fatu wrestle a single televised match, but knew his name in whispers, in lineage, in the aura of the men who bore his teachings. #ThankYouUmaga began trending globally within hours. It started with a single post, from an unexpected name, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. No long caption. Just an old, faded photo, a young Rock standing next to Umaga Fatu in a 1996 garage gym. The two are laughing. Behind them, a crumbling poster reads, "Train like your life depends on it." The caption read only, "My big brother. The one who showed me how to keep my soul when the lights come on. Rest easy. FAA Malo, USO." The post racked up 5 million likes in 2 hours. Suddenly, it wasn't just a family loss, it was a global one. AEW issued a statement. So did NJPW. Impact Wrestling changed their profile picture to black. Wrestling podcasts everywhere scrapped their scheduled episodes and went live with tribute streams. Even ESPN, typically slow to report on non-mainstream sports deaths, broke into their regular programming to dedicate a 90-second obituary to a man most sports fans had never heard of, but were about to feel. And the fans, they came in droves. At Raw that Monday night, a crowd of 16,000 in Detroit stood still for a full minute of silence before the show began. No announcer prompted them. No bell rang. The Jumbotron showed only the image of Umaga Fatu's face, serene, powerful, unsmiling. And for the first time in years, an entire arena was utterly, completely quiet. Some fans held signs for Umaga. He raised kings. Tribal chief's chief. Others simply wept. A father was seen holding his young son close as the silence ended. He's why Roman walks the way he walks, he whispered. Across social media, fans shared stories of when they first heard the name Umaga. A podcast episode. A shoot interview. A random clip from a training session in 2003 where he's teaching young Roman how to take a bump without fear. That's all it took, just one video, for people to understand this man wasn't seeking recognition. He was building warriors. One fan post went viral. It's wild how I never saw Umaga wrestle. But now I realize I've seen him every time Roman stares into the camera. Every time Solo lowers his head before a match. Every time Jacob walks to the ring like a lion. That was Umaga. Through them. The outpouring was overwhelming. Fans across generations, Attitude Era loyalists, Ruthless Aggression kids, Modern Bloodline followers, all found themselves connected by this shared moment of mourning. And for many, it felt like something deeper was happening. A reminder that wrestling is more than storylines and championship belts, that it's community. Blood. Sacrifice. Memory. And Umaga Fatu had become a symbol of all of it. In Samoa, a local church hosted a candlelight vigil. Photos of Umaga were surrounded by flowers and traditional mats. Elders spoke of honor. Of the old ways. Of the Tolafale, the orator warrior. A man who teaches through doing. Through silence. Through presence. One elder spoke in Samoan, her voice breaking. When our warriors die, they don't leave us. They return to the soil. And from that soil, new chiefs are born. In America, fans began organizing tribute meetups, impromptu gatherings in cities like Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles. They lit candles outside arenas. Left flowers at the gates of the WWE Performance Center. One man walked to the Capitol Wrestling Center wearing a hand-painted shirt that read, "Blood makes you related. Umaga made you family." But it wasn't just the fans who felt the loss. Superstars began posting raw, unfiltered messages. Seth Rollins, "We don't talk about the ones in the shadows enough." Umaga was the kind of man who could have made it big, but chose to make others bigger. "I owe him more than I can ever say." The Usos, joint post, "Our uncle. Our roots. The only reason we made it through our darkest times. Omega was our lighthouse. Lost without him." Solo Sikoa, Instagram story, just one word, chief. Overlaid on a photo of Solo kneeling barefoot in a ring with Omega behind him, hands on his shoulders. Even Cody Rhodes, a man once on the opposite side of the bloodline war, tweeted, "Every family has someone who carries the weight. Every kingdom has someone who builds it from the shadows. R.I.P. Omega Fatu. Respect eternal." And then came the moment that broke the internet. A leaked clip. Not meant for broadcast. A shaky fan-captured video from a closed rehearsal session. Roman Reigns, no music, no theatrics. Walking alone into the ring. No championship. No pyro. Just a black hoodie and red eyes. He kneels in the center. Stares at the mat and says, "You built me. I never said it enough. But I'll carry you with every breath. Every fight. Every crown. I promise." Then silence, then a single whisper, "Fa Amalialu. I miss you, uncle." The video spread across every platform. Millions watched it within hours. And for once, there were no trolls. No snark. Just unity, because grief, when shared, becomes a form of strength, and Omega's death had unified a fractured fanbase.